5 years. That is over 250 Wednesdays, 125 of which we posted episodes. There have been countless hours of preparation, more tears than I can count. But the sweetest of all, the moments, these sacred moments when God has made His presence known through a microphone, a story, a voice. Welcome to the special 5-year anniversary episode of the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. If you don't already know by now, I am your host. My name is Amy Watson. And today, even though life is crazy for all of us, especially for me, today I want to slow down and share with you why this podcast exists. I want to share with you how trauma shaped it and how faith continues to save it. This is the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. This is our 5th anniversary. I am recording this on April the 22nd, 2025, and on April the 22nd, 2020, we, because I have a producer that has been with me the whole time, we dropped our first episode. And this episode is kind of an ode to all of those stories, all of those times I got behind the microphone, all of those messages that we fielded. The honor that is to be the host of the Wednesdays with Watson podcast is never lost on me. You see, this podcast changed my life as it set me on a course that I will complete by the end of the year. I will have a doctorate degree in trauma and community care. That April day when I started this podcast literally changed my life, because as I lay in the hammock that day when the world was shut down, suddenly I understood that time is so short and the mission is so critical. Because you see, that mission is you, the listener, on the other side of this microphone. I didn't set out to be a podcaster. I didn't even really listen to podcasts before I launched this podcast. I didn't set out to be a podcaster. I set out to find survival techniques for my own trauma, for my own PTSD. Because for most of my life, as many as you know, trauma was the undercurrent, not just a chapter in my story, but trauma was the paper that my story was written on. A story of abuse, abandonment, neglect. Experiences that stole more than my safety. They stole, or at least tried to steal, because they didn't successfully steal my identity. But trauma wanted me to believe that I am my trauma. I am what happened to me. Trauma stole my voice. Therefore, it threatened to steal me. Because you see, I walked through life believing the lies that trauma whispers into your soul. Lies like you are too broken to be loved. You are too damaged to be useful. I knew Jesus. I know Jesus. I believed in God. I believe in God. But in those darkest times, I couldn't quite believe that He was as good as they said He was. Not when I was living with flashbacks, not when I was waking up in cold sweats, not when I was sleeping 2 and 3 hours at night, not when I was at the pinnacle of my struggle with PTSD, not when I was begging God to just make it stop. And then one day, I heard something deep in my spirit, and not audibly, but clearly. It was April of 2020 and the world was shut down. If you're listening to this, you likely remember those days. That same trauma that I endured my whole life was on overdrive with a worldwide pandemic, because remember, PTSD by definition means that your safety has been compromised, and now all of our safety had been compromised in those dark times. Some of you listening on the sound of my voice lost people during the pandemic. But I remember those days when we really didn't know what we were dealing with, and we were all sheltered in place. And I was laying in a hammock in my backyard, not really understanding the 2-week vacation, if you will. I needed to do something because this forced vacation was not working for me. My livelihood was turned upside down, and that is something that is still true today. I knew that I was struggling with PTSD, but besides what you could Google, I didn't know anything about PTSD. I had an inability really to read anything, but I needed something to help me. And just like God does, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to be that voice of PTSD that people like me could find from Google. I didn't know really that I needed to start a podcast, except for I had a friend of mine. Her name is JT. Shout out to JT, who said to me back in those days when I was blogging and all the things, she said, I think you need to start a podcast. So I was laying in that hammock on that April day. I knew that I needed to start a podcast to help people like me that needed to understand what was happening to them. So, before the whole world became podcasters, I started the Wednesdays with Watson podcast on April 22nd, 2020. That episode I entitled Healing That Doesn't Make Sense. I named that first season PTSD, Jesus, and Me, and that's exactly what it was in those early days, as I had a makeshift podcast space in the closet of my house. It all started with a microphone. It all started out of a desire to help people like me. It all started with this message of hope. It all started with my desire for people to know that they are seen, that they are known, that they are heard, that they are loved, and that they are valued. I remember those early days, though. I was so nervous as I would get behind that microphone, and so it began with some trembling hands, a shaky voice, and a fragile heart. You see, I didn't start the Wednesdays with Watson podcast because I was healed. I started it because I was healing. And I thought maybe if I could say it out loud, one of you would feel less alone. And those early episodes in that first season, I told pieces of my story. I told the hard parts, the ones that people usually skip over. I shared about my childhood trauma. After surviving that abuse, I then was in a domestic violence marriage. I talked about the long and agonizing process of learning to trust God when I couldn't feel Him. And something happened. I began to heal. My trauma began to make sense to me. My symptoms began to make sense to me. And all of that was a byproduct because you see, people started listening. They started listening to the podcast, not to just the content, but people grab on to the hope of the message of the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. That's the only reason why I do it. Because you see, I am a flawed human being living with PTSD, attempting to live a life worthy of the healing. And of course, I'm worthy of the healing. But I want people to look at my life and see hope. But let me be honest. There were moments during this podcast journey over the last 5 years that I didn't think that we would continue, because I was doing some deep healing as I was walking you through yours. But the thing to remember is that trauma recovery is not linear. Of course, there were setbacks. Of course, there were hard days. The kind of days when the darkness would feel all-encompassing again and the lies would get loud again. And there were times when I wondered if I had anything left to say. Oh, but then there's you, the listener. I get messages like I felt seen. I thought I was the only one to go through this. And maybe my favorite is I found Jesus again because of the hope of this podcast. And that's when I realized that this wasn't just a podcast, it was a ministry. It is a ministry. It is a mission. It is redemption. Because you see, we know that trauma rewires the brain. It changes the way that we see the world. It changes the way we see ourselves. But then when we pair faith with trauma, faith rewrites the story. Faith doesn't erase the pain. Faith gives the pain a purpose. It doesn't undo the past, but it certainly refines or reframes the future. And that's what these 5 years have been about. Faith in the fire. Faith through our traumatic events. And faith because we have pain, not in spite of it. Say that again. Faith because we have pain. It's the only way to walk through this life with unspeakable pain, is with the faith in the completed work of Jesus on the cross. So faith in spite of the pain. I believe with every fiber of my being that God doesn't waste pain. My life is proof of that. This podcast is proof of that. You, the listener, yes, you are proof that God doesn't waste pain. Every time somebody tunes in, every time somebody shares an episode, every time you tell a friend about the podcast, you are helping us build a space where faith and suffering don't have to be at odds. Because back to looking at faith, it's not the absence of pain. Faith is not the absence of pain. Faith is the presence of God in the pain. So what's next for the Wednesdays with Watson podcast? We keep telling stories. We keep sitting in that tension of trauma and healing. We keep declaring with every episode that Jesus is still in the business of resurrection. Even if the tomb looks like a diagnosis, a memory, a broken relationship, or a wounded soul, that tomb is empty and Jesus lives. He lives so that you can have hope. We're going to keep walking this journey together. Because 5 years ago when I hit record for the first time, with nothing but really a wounded heart, a little bit of knowledge, and a bunch of hope. Today I celebrate with a community of people who have chosen healing, who have chosen honesty, and maybe, hopefully, you've chosen Jesus too. I'm so grateful to you, the listener, for listening to me. I'm grateful to every guest that I've had on this podcast over the past 5 years who have told their story of pain. I'm grateful that you honor my story of pain. I hope that you believe that trauma doesn't have to be the end. To the survivor listening, especially if you have hit play for the first time on the Wednesdays with Watson podcast, you are seen, you are known, you are heard, you are loved, you are valued. You are not alone. Wherever you are in the world right now, there is somebody behind a microphone like me talking to you and throwing up prayers as the episodes get recorded, as they get released, and as we process them. You are not alone. You are more than what happened to you. To the struggler of faith, God is not afraid of your questions. God is not afraid of your questions. We just celebrated Easter, and I'm always marked by the silence of that Saturday. Sunday's coming to those that are struggling right now. God is not afraid of your questions. He sits with you in that silence. Sunday's coming. To every listener, old and new, this podcast is for you. This healing journey is for us. And to the God who gave me breath when I didn't want it anymore. This is all for you. And to God, I also thank for putting me on this journey because of this podcast to pursue my doctorate degree in trauma and community care. And while you're listening to this under the sound of my voice, I am a dissertation away from having that doctorate degree. That happened because of this podcast. That happened because people listen. That happened because there's a need out there for the message of hope and unspeakable trauma. Thank you to each and every listener out there. 5 years of faith, 5 years of fire, and 5 years of finding Jesus in the ashes of our brokenness. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing episodes. Thank you for sending me messages. Thank you to those of you who support me on Patreon. Thank you. Every month, I just smile when I see the Patreon deposit into my account. It's not much, but the people that support this podcast have done so almost from the beginning. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to my podcast producer, Amy Hyland. She has been with me from the beginning. I remember when I got that text from my friend JT who said, hey, you should start a podcast. I immediately reached out to Amy and said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can talk. And she has done the rest. Thank you, Amy Hyland. I consider you a ministry partner in the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. As for what's next, we are still going to go back to that generational trauma series. Because of the aforementioned dissertation, the podcast has suffered a little bit, and that's okay. But I want you guys to know that I am so grateful for these 5 years. I am grateful to the God who sees. I am just grateful. I hope that you will continue to listen. We will be back here in 2 weeks. Thank you, Jesus. Happy anniversary, 5th year anniversary to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast.